just really quickly before we roll into things here. The games you're going to see in the background. First game, my opponent goes for Zergling all in. So that's a speedling all in. You get about 18 drones. You get Zergling speed. You all in with that. Didn't work out for him. I was able to hold it without too much trouble, despite his things like an evolution chamber block and kind of junk like that. Lots of stupid plays. Ends up being a fairly easy hold. I do have to evacuate my drones and kind of move them to my natural. This happens several times throughout the game. He follows up his Zergling all in with the Baneling bust, which is very common because you know you're behind. The only way to really win the game from that point is to go for a Baneling bust. That fails, so he ends up going into Mutalisk. The only mistake I make against the Mutalisk is my Hydralisk Den is in a bad position. It gets picked off, so I obviously have to make a lot more spores than I normally would. However, it doesn't matter too much. I'm still able to easily win that game with my push. I just wait for 2-2 before pushing out. Now the important thing here is I don't take a third base, and the reason I don't take a third base is because I'm confident I'm going to win with my push, number one. Number two, I'm not going to be able to take a third base because of the Mutalisks. If he doesn't use the Mutalisk to defend, I'm just wasting money trying to take a third, so it doesn't make sense. I don't bother. The second game you're going to see is extremely fast. My opponent goes for a Zergling Roach all in. I spot the Zerglings leaving the base. I do not spot the Roaches, however I know he doesn't have an expansion, so it's a fairly clear one base all in. I think he's going for a Baneling bust, and the reason I think he's going for that is his speed was late, and his Zerglings all kind of went off to the side. They didn't go straight at my base, which is typically what you would do off an early pool like that. So, fairly straightforward. That game was a really easy hold. I only lost 2 drones in that one. The third game, my opponent decides to play a macro game with me, which sounds like a great idea. I love macro games. However, the big thing about the macro game that my opponent tries to play is he misses about 3 to 4 injects before the 10-minute mark, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but because of those missed injects, I had about a 15 drone lead. So keep that in mind when you're watching the game. When you see how the fight goes, heavily in my favor, it's purely because he missed those injects on his drones. He didn't get them out. When I watched the replay, my opponent actually had quite a lot of money banked up. The last thing about these games, they're all matched up against Platinum players. All of them, I believe, are Platinum playing against Diamonds, that kind of stuff, similar to me. So it's a pretty good series. Obviously, it's not Diamond or Master play, but it should give a pretty good idea because the vast majority of people tend to be in that kind of Platinum, Diamond, Gold range anyway. So this should help your ZvZ a lot. The games in the background are awesome. There is no practice game because the techniques and what I try to teach out here, it doesn't apply to a practice game. So with that in mind, check out the video. Hopefully you enjoy it. Hey guys, this is Filter Starcraft and welcome to episode number 6 of my Zerg Bronze to Master series. In this particular episode, I'm going to be focusing on Zerg versus Zerg. I get a lot of requests for, how do I deal with this in Zerg versus Zerg, and that kind of stuff. So I felt like Zerg versus Zerg, completely its own beast, deserved to be introduced a little bit earlier than I typically would for kind of build deviations and what to do and how to counter things. So the big thing to keep in mind here is your mechanics have to be spot on. If you're struggling with injects and things like that, the techniques taught here are simply not going to work for you. You have to be on top of your mechanics. You have to be on top of your injects. You can't be taking an extra 10 seconds to be making a drone in the early game. That is what's going to get you killed in a Zerg versus Zerg. So with that in mind, we're going to jump on into it here. Zerg versus Zerg is what I call a pure mechanics matchup. What a pure mechanics matchup is it comes down to your ability to make drones on time, your ability to hit injects, your ability to make the transition as cleanly as possible, which means not having 200 gas in the bank and nothing to spend it on. You have to be very, very clean with how you spend your money, how you hit your injects, and overall how you play. If you want a comparison, the easiest way to compare this one is to PvP. In Protoss versus Protoss, it comes down to almost pure micro. Who has the better micro, who had the better build order, that kind of stuff. Not necessarily who executed their play the best. In Zerg versus Zerg, it's all about mechanics. If you're 10 seconds late on a drone, it's going to kill you. You want to make sure you're hitting every drone on time. You want to make sure you're hitting those injects. Even in the face of an attack, you have to hit your injects. It's absolutely vital. Now, one of the main things I want to talk about here is Overlord patterns and minimap awareness. I'm going to start with Overlord patterns because that's how you get your minimap awareness. Your opening Overlord, the first Overlord you get on a 2-player map, should go directly to your opponent's natural to see if he expanded. If he didn't expand, you can leave it there and you're going to see everything leaving his main base. If he did expand, you want to pull it back to the ramp so that it does not get picked off by a queen, but at the same time that overlord is going to spot any units that are leaving his base, so it needs full map coverage. Your second overlord on a 2-player map is going to kind of back up that one, so it's going to be a little bit behind, so you never lose vision on that particular area of the map. Same thing with your third overlord, and then you want to take your fourth overlord and send that over to his third base, so you have a really good idea when he takes a third base, as well as you have a train of overlords that are going to help you catch anything on the mini-map. It's really, really important that you do things correctly in this regard, because if you don't send your overlords out, you're going to play totally blind, and you're going to lose every ZvZ you play to early aggression. So again, just send your first overlord straight out to his base, you're going to be in good shape. Now, 4-player maps, things change a little bit. Me personally, what I like to do is scout the 2 near positions. So I'll take my first overlord, and I will scout the nearest position to my overlord, whatever it is. And then if my opponent does not spawn there, I'm going to fly it up towards the second potential spawn point and try to get to the natural there to see if he's expanded or catch any units coming out. What I do with my second overlord is I send it the opposite direction of my first one. So what I will do is I will scout essentially the third possible spawn location for my opponent. That means the 2 closest areas I'm going to cover really quickly and be able to be in position in the correct amount of time to deal with anything he throws at me. If my opponent happens to spawn in the last area, it's a 33% chance that he will. I'm willing to take that chance that my overlord will get there in time to hold off any kind of super early aggression. Now, in other situation, your overlords are going to get there to see, a mass speedling play come out of his base, or some kind of Ling Bane all in, or even an early Roach play. You're still going to have enough time to spot all of that, so it's okay. The only things that can catch you in that situation are things like a 6 pool, a 7 pool, where somebody pulls a drone and plants it on your creep. Stuff like that can catch you off guard, but as long as you're playing smart and intelligently, you're going to have no trouble holding any of that stuff off too. Alright, the next thing we're going to talk about is mini-map awareness. I haven't spent too much time talking about this, but it is absolutely vital in a ZvZ. You should spend all of your time hitting injects, making drones, and staring at the mini-map. I'm not even joking when I say that. The main part of your screen does not exist. If you ever watch me play, what I do is I just stare at my mini-map. That's all I try to do. Anything I see leaving his base, I want to take a look at and get a count on. If I see him bringing out 4 Zerglings, I might make an extra pair of my own, or I might go, okay, that's fine. I don't need to worry about that. My spine crawlers will take care of it. My queen of my main will take care of it. No big deal. If all of a sudden I see 10 lings come out, or I see like 16 Zerglings come out, I know there's probably going to be some sort of bust coming up. I'll make my own, 10 to 16 lings to counter that, and then I'll start getting my Roach Warren to be ready and prepared. But you have to stare at the minimap. If you miss all those Zerglings coming out, and he gets to your base, and you just spend a round of larva on drones, you die. It's as simple as that. So it's absolutely vital that you just sit there, stare at the minimap. As far as I'm concerned, in a Zerg versus Zerg, once you have your overlords positioned, the only part of the game screen that really matters is the minimap. So get used to it. Just sit there, stare it down, stare it down, stare it down. It's going to start to feel more and more natural, and then every ZvZ you start to play in the future, you're going to notice, okay, he's sending a bunch of stuff out, let me take a look at it. Okay, that's 10 lings. I'll make a few on my own. 6 should be okay, because you get to squeeze an extra couple drones in there, you're good, you're ready to go. Now, this is one of the more advanced techniques. You don't have to do it every game. As a matter of fact, I really don't do it, and I still win pretty much all my games in Masters in terms of Zerg versus Zerg. I don't have any trouble with it. However, if you want to take your game to that next level, and you want to be extra prepared for anything that could come at you, you can start doing what's called a gas count. Now, what gas counting is when you get to his base and you see that he has not expanded yet, what you want to do is just swing around the back of his main, check both geysers, and then do a count. If he's only mined out 100 gas, that means he got speed. That could either be defensive or offensive, so you don't really get any information off that. However, once he starts going beyond that 100 gas, and you still don't see an expansion, chances are there's going to be either a Baneling all-in coming at you, or some kind of Roach all-in. At that point, it's worthwhile to throw down, an extra spine crawler in your base, get an extra queen out. If you want to play around with Banelings, you can get a Baneling nest and speed. I prefer to go the Roach route, so I'll take 2 gas in my own base and get Roaches. I can usually get them out in time, and I'll be ready to go. The nice thing about going for a Roach play to defend is if he goes for Roaches, you're not stuck trying to defend with, Speedlings and Banelings. It just doesn't work very well against a Roach all-in, at least if it's done properly. So again, if he breaks that 100 gas count and he starts going to, 120, 130 gas mine, 150 gas mine, that's when you want to start being a little bit cautious about what could potentially be coming at you. Again, this is a little bit more of an advanced technique. I don't expect everybody to do it. I actually don't do it in my own games, but it is a really good way to kind of push your ZvZ to the very next level. The one thing to keep in mind when doing a gas count is don't assume that your opponent is doing it intentionally every time. Sometimes your opponent's just bad, sometimes he forgot, sometimes he's doing it defensively. Don't overreact yourself and make like 20 spine crawlers and have no drones and die to a push much later in the game. Alright, we're going to talk about countering very early aggression. What I mean by very early aggression is things like 6 pools, things like a 7 pool where he brings his drone to make a spine crawler in your base. That can be very difficult to hold. Something like a 6 pool where he brings his drones, a lot of times you will just die to that. It's very difficult to hold. So we're going to talk about that super early kind of sub 5 minute aggression where you're not going to be able to react and get your Roach Warren in time. So in this particular situation, you're going to notice your opponent is not expanded, you're not quite sure what's coming at you, then all of a sudden 20 Zerglings come at you. What you want to do is get an extra spine crawler, get an extra queen, turn all your larvae into Zerglings so that you're going to be okay, and then from there you can take your gas and get into your Roach Warren. It's going to be really tooth and nail to hang on, but you're going to be okay. So once you get your roaches out, that's where you start to stabilize. That's where you start to become okay in those really early situations. But it's important that you get an extra queen, you get an extra spine crawler, you start making Zerglings of your own. You should still be an advantage if your opponent's on 1 base tier 2. Now, when we're talking about a 6 or 7 pool, that really early stuff, don't cancel your natural immediately. Here's the catch with canceling your natural. You can't afford to spend that money. That money does absolutely nothing for you. It's not going to help you hold off the aggression. So even if he kills your natural, that's okay. It buys you time. What you want to be doing in your own base is taking a gas, potentially getting a Roach Warren. You can kind of do either or. It really depends, but you're going to have to start making mass Zerglings right away. That's kind of the big thing. So as soon as you see that really aggressive, super early thing coming, just get a spine crawler in your main. You might want to start an extra queen as well and start making Zerglings of your own. If it is a pure 6 pool and your spawning pool is not even up yet, you're going to have to pull drones. What he's going to do is when you pull your drones, he's either just going to engage with his lings on your drones, and then you can kind of group small batches of them and pull them back to your mineral line as they get hurt. That should help disable a lot of your drones. And then you can kind of wait for your spawning pool to get up. One big thing you want to do is kind of save your money so that you're going to be able to make lings as soon as your spawning pool pops up and hopefully make a queen in that same amount of time. So it becomes really important to play that really cautiously. And he's going to keep streaming lings over and over to your base. One big thing that can really throw off your defense in this particular situation is if he tries to build a spine crawler on your creep. Now what you have to do with that is assign 4 to 5 drones to that spine crawler. That's going to be able to kill it before it'll get up. You're going to be in great shape, but you have to be really careful to not have those drones picked off, and you can't have those drones lost in that particular period of time. The big thing about countering that 6 or 7 pool aggression is a lot of that is feel and making the right decision. A lot of that comes down to your ability to micro your drones effectively, not lose too much mining time in comparison to what he's doing, because again, he might drone behind it, or he might continue to stream links at you. So one of the best ways to deal with this, unfortunately, is just to play a lot of games, get used to defending it. Again, don't immediately cancel your natural. In a lot of situations, he's going to try to attack your natural, which is the wrong move on his part. But if he does that, hey cool, you're buying yourself plenty of time. You can't spend that money anyway. You may as well leave that up. Even if he ends up killing it off, you want to try to run in with the broodlings to help you out. So, countering that very early aggression, it's tough. You just got to deal with it sometimes, and you just got to play through it, get experience with it, get your micro up. You're going to find yourself holding that a lot. The other thing about it is, every Zerg on the ladder does not 6 pool, every Zerg on the ladder does not 7 pool, so you don't have to worry too much about it. But if you do want to get used to it, one of the coolest things you can do is grab a buddy and get him to 6 pool you 10 games in a row. Eventually you're going to be able to start holding it off with relative ease. That's what I've done against a lot of cheeses in my own play just to improve it quickly. So again, if you find yourself really struggling with this, and you can't kind of follow the basics of just the 4 to 5 drones on a spine crawler, pulling your drones, putting them back, pulling them, putting them back, not chasing around because you still need to mine, then go ahead and get a friend to 6 pool you like 10 games in a row, do your build normally, and only react once you see what he's sending at you. Alright, the first thing I want to talk about regarding mid to late game situations are you need to identify that the game is going to a mid game, and that it's not just going to be a kind of a delayed all-in. One of the best ways to do that is just with your Overlord over top of his natural. Once he takes his natural, then the game typically shifts over to a mid game. So you pull that Overlord out, you still have to stare down the mini-map. If units start streaming out, he's simply using that as a second hatchery in order to gain more units, and he's not actually mining out of it. A couple of things you can do to combat this is simply having an Overlord behind the mineral line will let you see if the minerals are getting mined there. If they are, then the game's transitioning to mid-game and you're in great shape. If you don't want to do that, again, just kind of assume once he starts taking his natural that you're going to be in good shape, it's going to go to mid-game, and then it's all about hitting your injects, getting to that 55, 60 drone mark. You're going to be in great shape. Now, what you want to do in kind of the mid-game is get all 4 of your gas, get your +1/+1 on your roaches, get your roach speed, get +2/+2, and then when you attack, you want to try to attack with +2/+2 finished. You never want to engage 1-1 when you're just about to finish 2-2. So once you kind of get that 2-2, you should be in good shape to attack. You don't have to worry too much. Now, one of the biggest fears when you're going roach play is mutalisks. So if you see him getting a lot of Zerglings, or you see Zerglings roaming the map to kind of take out watchtowers, maybe they're underneath some of your overlords, you know he can't attack you with them, but he's still continuing to make them. That means he's probably going for mutalisks. When you identify that situation, you need to make a Hydralisk den and start getting some Hydralisks. Your Hydralisk will come out in more than enough time to fend off the mutalisks along with your queens. It's okay to get a spore crawler or 2 as well. A group of 6 to 7 A-mutas can't really engage a spore crawler without taking losses, so he's probably not going to attack into that. If you do see a big swell of like 20 plus mutalisks, what you have to do is take all your roaches, box them, attack him, and just keep making roaches and rallying them in until you can start making hydras to defend. The other thing you want to do is pick one of your bases. So if he's attacking your main, you're not going to really get spore crawlers up in your main, right? What you want to do is start making spore crawlers at your natural and just make a lot of them. In a situation like that where it comes up to kind of a semi-base trade, he might be able to take out your main, but he's not going to be able to take out your natural with all the spore crawlers you're going to put up. And what that means is your roaches are going to be able to do a lot of damage to him. Now, from his perspective, he has to make the decision, do I take my mutalisk and go home to defend the roaches and potentially risk not damaging the main, or do I continue to kill off the main? If he continues to kill off your main, there's a very good chance you'll be able to go in, kill his natural, kill his main, kill all his tech, no problem at all. That's how I choose to play it. The big thing is, roaches, don't attack mutalisks, don't leave them at home, there's no reason for them to be at home, you have to attack. So if you get attacked by mutalisks and you're not prepared, again, just take all your roaches, swing them out, go attack him, kill his base, kill his natural, whatever, you're going to kill him off. If he chooses to defend with his mutalisks, that's when you try to secure your main with mostly spore crawlers and as many queens as you can realistically make out of your 2 hatcheries. So when he goes to choose to defend, you're going to attack with your roaches. You can probably still trade off and get his natural. You might even be able to get his main too, depending on how many mutalisks he has. Realistically, if you have 30 or 40 roaches and he has 20 or 30 mutalisks, you're going to win that fight. It sounds really stupid, but it actually works quite well. The other thing that works well is taking your roaches and kind of spreading them out to kill buildings over a larger group. Mutalisks actually do a lot of splash damage. The reason for that is they hit essentially 3 targets with each attack. So if you're attacking kind of all over his base, you're going to be able to kill off a lot more than if you have your roaches in one big pile, because his mutalisks are going to be able to attack that pile and kill it off a lot faster. So again, your only fear there realistically is going to be mutalisk play. The other tech choice your opponent can make is going for Roach Infester. Now, when you identify that he's going for Roach Infester, which is usually as simple as you see Infestors in his attack, or maybe you think he's just going for pure Roach, what you want to do is take advantage of your mechanics. So that means taking your own third base, getting your gases up, getting your Hydralisk den out, adding on a few drones for that third, but not too many, and then from there what you want to do is max out and go attack him. The one kind of caveat to that is you want to make sure you get your own infestation pit so that you can go to hive and get +3/+3. From my own personal experience in playing the game, I've never lost to any player that went for Roach Infester. It's not a joke. In all the ZvZs I played on either my Smurf account, I have another Masters account, or kind of my main account, I've never lost to anybody that went Roach Infester. and has never killed me. Roach Hydra, I find, usually beats it unless the opponent has phenomenal phenomenal micro, and even in the pro games I've seen, your Roach Hydra will usually beat your Infestor play. The reason for that is it's really difficult to get the proper mixture of Infestors to Roaches, as well as get the right upgrades for the Roaches. So what ends up happening is you're on kind of a 3-3, and Hydralisk will outdamage what the Infestors do. Now, if Infestors get into your Hydralisk, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. However, if you only have a few of them in your army, and your army is still mostly Roaches, you're going to power through his Roaches, even with the added damage that his Infestors are going to bring to the battle. So again, what you really want to do if you identify a player going for pure Roach or going for Roach Hydra is just max out before you attack. Sounds really stupid, but it works really well. If your mechanics are better than your opponent, you win the game 100% of the time. Fairly simple. When you attack, all you do is go kill off his third base, then kill his natural, depending on the map. So a map like Daybreak, killing the natural is actually a pretty good idea because the third base requires a long time and a big wrap to get to. However, on most maps, the third base is more accessible, so that's the base you want to attack. It's very, very simple, straightforward, easy to do. So again, if you identify pure Roach, or you see Roaches and you suspect Infestors, or if you flat out see the Infestors, you just start to mix in some Hydralisks, wait till you max out, then you can go kill them. Very simple, very straightforward, very easy to do. Now, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about third bases in Zerg vs. Zerg. Third bases are not very beneficial typically. They often result on if you take it too early, you lose because you just don't have the unit count, your opponent overwhelms you. If he has 20% more Roaches, he wins that fight handily. You're not going to be able to reinforce, you're not going to be able to kill his army, you lose the game. Very simple and straightforward. So with the third base, you typically never want to be the player to take it first, unless you're starting to make a ton of Roaches, your +2/+2 is starting to finish up, you feel like you're in really good shape in your own base, and he hasn't taken one yet, you should be okay. Go ahead, take the third base, add on a couple of drones, take the gases there, get a queen for that base, and then from there, continue to max out on Roach Hydra. If your opponent decides to take a much earlier third base than you, again, don't be alarmed. As soon as you see him take a third base, obviously get your Overlord out of there so it doesn't die, and just take your own. Very simple. In that type of situation, your opponent is not going to be able to be aggressive anytime soon. And if you're going for kind of the Roach Hydra composition, and your opponent is going for, say, Roach Infestor, you actually do not need as many drones as he does, because he needs a lot more gas, he's going to need tons of minerals, he probably even needs a fourth base, and you don't. So when you get up to your 3 bases, you're in great shape, you really don't have to worry about it. From there, it's all about making Roaches, attacking, and rallying. So again, when it comes down to a third base, take a third base when you feel extremely comfortable that he can't attack and kill you. So what that means is your +2/+2 is about to finish up, you've already got a ton of Roaches, you feel like you're in great shape, cool, take a third base. If you see your opponent take a third base, that's a really good time to take a third base. Other than that, don't bother. If you try to take a third base in a Zerg vs. Zerg before you've started Roach production, you're going to lose that game more often than not. Because all your opponent has to do is go, oh, okay, you took a third base, this is really early, start making a bunch of Roaches, attack you, he's going to at the very least kill that third base, and he'll probably kill you too. So again, just really, really simple, straightforward stuff. Just watch for his third base, take one after he takes one. Don't worry too much about the drone count at that point in time, because you should be in great shape with your kind of Roach Hydra army. Now, the last thing I want to talk about for Zerg vs. Zerg is attacking. You don't want to attack in a Zerg vs. Zerg if you're going for Roach Hydra until you're very close to max. You have an upgrade advantage, you feel like you're in great shape, then you can attack. Your units are going to rally across. You want to try to rally across Roaches because they'll get there faster than Hydralisks. So once you kind of have your Hydralisks in your army, you're probably never going to add more. You want to try to keep them behind the Roaches as much as possible, and just rally in Roaches, get them up to the front, get them in front of the Hydras, use them to tank and kill off your opponent. I typically never really attack before I max out. In a Zerg vs. Zerg, it doesn't usually make sense. There's a few exceptions to this. Exceptions being when Mutalisks are killing off my main, I attack because my Roaches are not going to do me any good at home, and I know he's not going to have very much to defend with because he made all the Mutalisks, right? Very simple and straightforward. So when you're attacking, just be conservative, take your time, make sure you're in a good situation. Another one that can work out really well for you is if you're on 1-1 and your 2-2 is about to finish up, and you take a look at your opponent's roaches from underneath an overlord or whatever, and you say, hey, he's only on 0-1 or he's on 1-0. I think I can win this fight. Then you attack. Because if your opponent gets to 1-1 and you're 2-2, you're going to win that fight. No problem. Don't have to worry about it. But never attack in a situation where you're not sure what your opponent's upgrades are. Never attack in a situation where you're not comfortable with where you are in terms of your own economy, how many roaches you have, that kind of stuff. If you try to make an attack at, say, 130 food, all of a sudden, as your roaches start to die off and new ones start to come in to reinforce, the army chemistry and dynamic changes a lot. So if you're at 130 food and say 60 of that is drones, and we'll ignore the queens for now, that means you have about 30 roaches. If your opponent has similar food to you and he has about 30 roaches and you only have a 1 upgrade advantage, you only have, say, an armor upgrade advantage, if he makes 10 roaches and rallies them in, that all of a sudden creates a situation where it's 40 roaches against 30 for you. You're not going to win that fight. You're going to be forced to back off. You're going to put yourself in a lot of trouble. So it's really important that you're very careful in how you attack. Now, the reverse of that is true. If you attack when you're near 200 and you have, say, 50 roaches and 10 hydralisks, and your opponent has 50 roaches and whatever, maybe he just has 60 roaches, you're going to win that fight. And even if things, like, let's say your opponent rallies in 5 or 10 more roaches, the numbers don't skew off that much that your reinforcements can't come in and make up the difference. He's not going to be able to kill your army fast enough to really make a big difference. When you start talking in high numbers where he maybe has a 10% bigger army with his reinforcements, your upgrade advantage is all of a sudden going to completely nullify that and probably still win you the battle. In a situation where he has a 25% bigger army, your upgrade advantage is not going to help you at all, right? So it's really, really important that when you're attacking, you want to attack with big numbers of roaches, big numbers of roach hydra. You don't want to attack with small numbers of those units. If you have a big, overwhelming force, maybe your opponent overdroned. Maybe he went to 80 drones or something, or 85 drones, and you're still at, kind of 60-ish. All of a sudden, you have an extra 10 roaches that he cannot make no matter what. Really, really simple. The other thing about attacking is, if your opponent has 4 or 5 spine crawlers, don't go up the ramp. Use an overlord to kind of spot so you can see what's there, but you don't need to go up the ramp to kill his natural unless you know you have a big advantage, in which case you have to basically run all your roaches up his ramp, use a few to target down spine crawlers, win the fight there. If you have an even army or a slight army advantage and he has 4 spine crawlers, he's going to win the fight very, very easily. So it's important that you're smart when you attack. If you do have any questions or comments, definitely leave them in the comments below. Hit me up on Team Liquid, hit me up on Twitter. Do answer most of that stuff. Alright, so that wraps up this particular episode of Bronze to Masters. When we're talking about Zerg versus Zerg, there's no point in me doing a demonstration game because this is all read and react. Zerg versus Zerg is a challenging matchup, but it's a very fun one, and you can kind of distill it and simplify it as much as possible. If all you do is pay attention to the mini-map and making units based on what he's making, and then from there you only really ever attack when you're near max, and you continue your upgrades, you're going to win a lot of games in Zerg versus Zerg. So it's very straightforward. It's a matchup that you really shouldn't struggle in unless you play somebody else that's watching my video and maybe has a little bit better mechanics than you do. But other than that, it should be a really easy, fun matchup for you. I personally enjoy Zerg versus Zerg. I know a lot of people really groan and hate it, but I really like it. It's a fun matchup. It's a matchup that I feel I can win based off my own skill, not based off my opponent and what kind of cheesy shenanigans that he tries to pull. So, again, really cool, really fun. If you do have questions, or you are still struggling with certain styles or things or whatever, leave them in the comments. Leave them over on Team Liquid. There's a great thread. It's called Bronze to Masters. Leave some questions in there. Lots of people in there like to help out. Or hit me up on Twitter. I do a pretty good job of answering all the questions I get on Twitter. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. I know it's a difficult one and a hard one to take in, and unfortunately it's one that I can't benchmark and demonstrate for you because there's just so much going on. It's a little bit like my scouting episode for Terran, but if you just kind of pay attention to the very basic stuff like attacking only with an advantage, not worrying too much about your opponent and what he's doing, and understand that there's really not this huge amount of stuff that can happen to you, just play without fear, play your game, don't worry too much about what your opponent's doing, and stare down the minimap. If you tape off your entire game screen and only stare at the minimap, you'll probably win more ZvZs than somebody who does it the reverse way. Anyway, this is Filter Starcraft, signing out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I definitely enjoyed making it, and hopefully I'll see some of you guys on ladder playing Zerg.